So let's just add a very quick take on the stock market. Temple Ashaju, our business correspondent, is coming in on the show from our studios at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Temple, good morning. A very big day for Zenith Bank, dropping 150 billion naira profit reports on the trading floor. That's as big as it can get.
Well, true, Bosun. Yesterday we saw that the company actually closed around 17 naira per share. We had actually thought that investors will react more positively to this particular numbers, but what we saw yesterday just didn't reflect enough interest as analysts had actually predicted yesterday, in spite of the fact that the numbers all look very positive. Instead, yesterday, we saw more interest in UBA, where we saw late trading, on that particular account, as well as FBN Holdings, and in fact, Dangote Cement. I think UBA eventually, increased by more than 2% yesterday. FBN Holdings, moved closer to 5 naira 40 kobo. And then we saw Dangote Cement also making a comeback by more than 1% yesterday. What we're looking at today is perhaps the kind of reaction that investors will, probably give to Zenith Bank. Maybe today will be better than what we saw yesterday. Perhaps that interest, will be renewed today. That's the expectation of traders and a couple of market watchers as we have this morning, Bosun.
So, okay, let's quickly check that out for us, Tempo, and then we get back to you later on the show before we wrap it up. Thank you so much, Tempo, for raising the curtain on the market street for today. But let's check in with the London marketplace. Juliana Olayinka, my colleague, is coming through from our London studios. This is Royal Bank of Scotland coming through with a slap of about £900 million in relation to insurance payment. And that's pushing RBS third quarter numbers into negative territory. This more there is a masking. Let's push Brexit aside a little bit. Juliana, good morning, please. My apologies there. I ought to say good morning first. Good morning. So bring us up to speed. Look into the RBS numbers for us and what's happening to the share price of that bank, this big bank, the London Stock Exchange this morning.
Well, good morning, Bosun. This is certainly one of the biggest corporate stories coming out of London today, and that is, you're correct, RBS, their shares plummeted about 3.5% at the start of early trading, and that's because they posted some disappointing third quarter revenue sales after what they consider a very challenging quarter. So they announced that their shares plunged, their income plunged by 419 million to 150 million pounds, and that is because they lost out on 900 million pounds worth of last minute PPI claims. PPI was that huge insurance scandal where for about 10 years some of the big banks were mis-selling insurance to people. Everybody had about 8 years in the UK. Everybody was familiar with those PPI phone calls, and there was a last minute rush in August, and it's really affected them. Now, we spoke about this on your show a couple of months ago, and they actually have a new CEO coming in on Monday, Alison Rose. This is the first time one of the big four banks have had a female executive. So a lot of people are saying that it's going to be very difficult for her because, of course, we know as well there's a big switch to digital. So a lot of these big banks are struggling to stay relevant in a time where most people don't want to go inside a bank. So bad losses for RBS, and they've got a big uphill struggle in the next quarter.
Now, this is bad for RBS. 448 million pounds profit a year earlier. Now a net loss of 315 million pounds, almost a wipeout. And so not surprising how the market investors give what called a knee-jerk reaction early today. But again, still sticking with the corporate world, what's this all sort of about retail, British retailers are talking about job losses, job security and all of that on high street. Well, what are the concerns here across Britain, Juliana?
Well, it's an interesting story. We've been speaking over the past couple of months just about how tumultuous the high street is. And it's not just affecting the shop owners. It's, of course, affecting the staff. The British Retail Consortium, they're the UK Trade Association. They've warned the government that they must do whatever they can to inject some life into the high street, because they noted that about 85,000 jobs have been lost from the retail sector over the past year. It also means that this is the 15th consecutive quarter that they're seeing these losses. These losses are affecting full-time staff and part-time staff. And we have seen that the government, the British government, they seem to really focus on construction and manufacturing work losses. But, you know, the BRC is saying that the UK government really need to focus on the UK high street. The UK high street has suffered recently. A lot of them are saying that the high rent rates, high business rates. We've also in the UK really changed the rules about minimum wages, so people are paying more. But of course, if you don't have the people walking into your shops, you can't pay your staff. So they've urged the government to really take a look at this. And 85,000 jobs is quite a stark number, especially considering that the UK labour market is showing record high employment at the moment, but not in retail stores.
Okay, a final one. European Central Bank President Mario Draghi is having his final press briefing today, meeting and all of that, and is leaving leaving the office for Christine Lagarde. Is the British press talking about this, or is all more about the Brexit?
Well, of course, it's all Brexit, 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 Brexit. But, you know, the business press are talking about it. Mario Draghi, whether you love him or hate him, he had a very powerful 8 years as the head of ECB, some of them highs, some of them lows. But he has been seen as the person who's really kept the Eurozone together, and he is one of the most powerful officials within the Eurozone. And of course, anything that affects the Eurozone, even though the UK are not in that zone, they are still part of the continent. So yes, he will be taking his final bow, and a lot of people will be listening to what he's been saying, because we know that the PMI numbers coming out of Europe at the moment haven't been very good. Of course, Brexit and the fact that Britain will be leaving the EU really will have large ramifications, and their largest economy, Germany, is really struggling. We're not sure whether or not they'll be going into recession. So I think a lot of people will be listening to what he's saying. He's likely to be coming up in the UK news. But all the attention now is, of course, on the former IMF chief, Christine Lagarde, who will take over. And she'll take over at a period where global uncertainty around economics is at an all-time high.
Interesting. Okay, Juliana, take a bow, and thank you very much for coming through on the program this morning. Thank you. That's a nice bow. See you at 1:30 with Chimezie Obiwago on Business Incorporated. We're getting back into our own Market Street when we come back after the break.